He was publicly humiliated and kicked out of the bar when he refused to take off his MAGA hat, being told that there's no place for that here. The bartender, with a smug grin, decided to show who was in charge, completely unaware that he was confronting the bar's new owner. What happened the next day turned everything upside down and made everyone in the bar rethink their attitudes. But to understand how it all unfolded, let's go back to the very beginning. Harry Denton, a successful 45-year-old businessman, had recently purchased a bar in the heart of the city. The establishment was known for its cozy atmosphere and diverse clientele. Harry decided to personally check out the vibe, remaining incognito. He chose a casual outfit, jeans, a navy blazer, and his favorite MAGA hat, which he wore proudly. Upon entering the bar, Harry took a moment to survey the place. Behind the counter stood a young bartender, about 25 years old, with a trendy haircut and an air of confidence. The room was lively. A group of students animatedly discussed something at a corner table. Two businessmen sipped coffee while talking shop, and a pair of workers looked relaxed after a long day. Harry took a seat at the bar. The bartender glanced at him and immediately noticed the hat. His expression shifted to one of disdain, though he said nothing. Harry raised his hand to get the bartender's attention. "Good evening," Harry began calmly. "Could I get a bourbon, please?" The bartender approached slowly, his lips curling into a smirk. His eyes moved from the hat to Harry's face. "We've got a no politics policy here," he said sarcastically. "It's just a hat," Harry replied, keeping his tone polite. "A hat that bothers a lot of people here. If you want a drink, take it off." The bartender shot back, folding his arms. Harry looked at him steadily. "I respect other people's views, and you should respect mine. I'm just here for a bourbon." The exchange began to draw attention. A few customers started whispering among themselves. One of the students at the corner table loudly called out, "Those MAGA hats are symbols of hate. Get out of here with that nonsense." Harry turned to look at them, but said nothing. He remained composed, though the tension in the room was palpable. The bartender, feeding off the energy in the room, stepped closer. "Listen, if you don't want trouble, just leave," he said louder, ensuring everyone could hear. "I came here as a customer," Harry replied calmly. "Do you have a legitimate reason to throw me out? I've got every right not to serve anyone who disrupts the atmosphere. And your hat," the bartender jabbed a finger toward Harry's head, "is a disruption." Harry paused, letting the moment sink in. "So, this is your bar?" he asked quietly, his tone almost emotionless. "Of course it is. I decide who drinks here and who doesn't," the bartender declared, theatrically gesturing toward the door. Some of the customers clapped in approval. The atmosphere in the bar grew increasingly hostile, but Harry remained calm. He stood up and said, "Looks like you've got your own rules. Good luck with them." He turned and walked toward the door, feeling the stares following him. As he left, someone shouted loudly behind him, "Glad they're kicking people like that out!" Once outside, Harry paused, took a deep breath, and quietly said to himself, "Tomorrow, this place will be entirely different." The next morning, Harry returned to the bar. He wore the same casual outfit, including his MAGA hat, but this time he was mentally and strategically prepared. As he entered, he immediately noticed the bartender chatting animatedly with two colleagues at the counter. Eric, as Harry overheard the bartender being called, looked as self-assured as ever. His gestures were exaggerated, and his voice carried loudly through the room, seemingly recounting the events of the previous night. "You should have seen his face," Eric said mockingly. "These MAGA hats are just trouble magnets. I told him straight away he wouldn't last here." One of his colleagues chuckled, while the other nodded in agreement. When Harry stepped inside, their conversation abruptly stopped. Eric froze for a moment, then quickly regained his smug demeanor. "Oh, you're back?" Eric said with fake politeness. "I thought I made it clear yesterday that people like you aren't welcome here." Harry, unbothered, took a seat at the bar. "I came for a drink. Are you ready to serve me?" he asked calmly. Eric raised an eyebrow, glanced at his colleagues, and smirked. "Didn't you get it yesterday? You're not getting anything here. Just leave." The situation once again drew the attention of the patrons. Some turned to watch, intrigued by the developing drama. An older man with a cane, one of the bar's regulars, grumbled. "Kid, you're here to serve everyone, not lecture people." Eric waved him off dismissively. "This isn't your business, George. This guy has a problem with his choice of accessories." Harry, still composed, said, "Yesterday you claimed this bar belongs to you. Is that true?" Eric smirked wider. "Does it look like it's not? I run everything here." At that moment, a young man who seemed to be one of the students from the previous night stepped up to the bar. With a bold attitude, he pointed at Harry's hat and said, "You know people only wear those things to piss others off. You should just leave." Harry, unflinching, replied, "My presence here shouldn't bother anyone. But if you continue discriminating against me, be prepared for the consequences." Eric burst into laughter. "Consequences? Do you really think anyone's going to side with you? Those hats say everything anyone needs to know about you." The room buzzed with murmurs as patrons began discussing the unfolding situation. Tension filled the air as Eric leaned closer to Harry, pointing toward the door. "Either you leave now, or I'll call security," he said loudly. Harry locked eyes with him and replied, "Go ahead, but when I come back, your perspective on your job will change entirely." Eric laughed again, dismissing Harry's words as empty threats. He waved at one of his colleagues and shouted, "Get security in here to escort this guy out." A few minutes later, 2 uniformed security guards entered the bar. One approached Harry calmly and said, "Sir, we've been asked to escort you out." Harry stood, gave the guards a respectful look, and said, "You're just doing your job, and I respect that, but prepare yourselves for what's coming." With that, he left, leaving behind a trail of whispers and chuckles. Eric turned back to his colleagues, grinning widely. "Well, I think it's clear who's in charge here." Some patrons applauded, but others seemed less sure. The older regular, George, shook his head and muttered, "That man is clearly not who you think he is." The next morning, Harry walked into the bar again, but this time without his hat and dressed in a business suit. Following him was a group of 2 men and 1 woman, all in formal attire. Harry looked focused, his steps confident. At that moment, Eric, chatting with his co-workers, was preparing the bar for opening. There were no customers yet, and he clearly didn't expect to see Harry again. "Oh, it's you again," Eric said mockingly as he noticed Harry. "Don't you get the hint?" Harry ignored his words, approached the counter, and turning to his companion said, "We need to discuss the establishment's operations." Eric frowned, but still didn't understand where this was going. "Did you bring lawyers? Planning to sue me because I kicked you out? Be my guest." One of the men accompanying Harry stepped forward and announced loudly, "To all bar employees, let me introduce your new owner, Mr. Harry Denton." Eric froze as if he hadn't heard correctly. He looked at Harry, then at the others, and nervously laughed. "This is a joke, right? You can't be the owner." Harry calmly took a folder from the inner pocket of his jacket, opened it, and placed it on the counter in front of Eric. It was official documentation of the bar's purchase. "It's true. I acquired this establishment last week. Yesterday, I visited to see how customers are treated here. And what did I witness, Eric?" Eric turned pale but tried to justify himself. "Listen, I was just doing my job. Customers like you cause conflicts?" Harry raised his hand, cutting him off. "Customers like me? What exactly do you mean by that? My political views? My right to wear what I want?" Eric began to stammer. "Well, I was just trying to keep the peace. People don't like those kinds of symbols." Harry firmly replied, "Your job is to serve customers, not decide which views are acceptable. Yesterday, you publicly humiliated me. Today, we're going to address how this affects the entire establishment." Employees and security guards started to gather around, intrigued by what was happening. The tension in the air was palpable. One of Eric's co-workers tried to intervene. "Eric, maybe you should just apologize." But Eric, hurt and humiliated, raised his voice. "I didn't do anything wrong. He was provoking people with his hat." Harry looked around at the staff and added, "I'd like to hear the rest of your opinions." Is this how things work here? Humiliating customers because of their appearance or beliefs? One of the bartenders hesitantly said, "Well, it's not exactly right. We were just following his lead." The older security guard, who had escorted Harry out the day before, stepped forward and said firmly, "Sir, I didn't know who you were, but yesterday I felt ashamed for being part of that. I'm willing to work under your rules if you'll give us a chance." Harry nodded. "Thank you. I respect honesty, and that's what I expect from all employees." He turned back to Eric. "You have two options. Either you admit your mistake and change your attitude, or I'll have to terminate your employment. The decision is yours." Eric, realizing the situation had gone too far, looked flustered, but said nothing. The atmosphere grew tenser. The staff waited for his response while Harry stood calmly, waiting. Eric stood opposite Harry, noticeably pale. Just a minute ago, he had been confident in his position, but now he realized he had made a huge mistake. The bar staff remained silent, waiting for his answer. Harry watched him with icy composure, waiting to see what he would do. "Fine, I apologize," Eric finally muttered, avoiding eye contact with Harry. "Louder, so everyone can hear," Harry said calmly, not moving. Eric took a deep breath and raised his voice. "I apologize for my behavior yesterday. It was wrong." Harry, maintaining his calm tone, continued, "Apologies are a first step, but they're not enough. Do you believe you have the right to decide who deserves service based on your personal biases?" Eric tried to argue. "No, I just wanted to avoid conflicts." "Conflicts that you yourself provoked with your behavior," Harry interrupted. "And this conflict isn't just between you and me. It affects everyone working here and the customers who come here." Harry turned to the gathered employees. "From now on, this establishment will operate by a new set of rules. The main rule is respect for all customers, regardless of their views, background, or appearance. Is that clear?" The employees nodded, and a few murmured, "Yes, of course." Harry turned back to Eric. "Now, as for you, you can stay, but only if you prove that you're capable of changing. Today, you will publicly apologize to all the customers who witnessed your behavior yesterday. If you don't, you won't work here anymore." Eric froze, his face red with anger and humiliation. He understood he had no way out. All eyes were on him. Finally, through gritted teeth, he said, "Fine." Harry nodded and turned to the others, adding, "Starting today, this place will be a symbol of respect and equality. If anyone disagrees, the door is open." A few employees exchanged glances, but no one dared to leave. The atmosphere began to shift. The staff looked tense, but ready to work under the new rules. Later that evening, when the bar opened to customers, Harry stayed in the hall, observing the operation. Eric, clearly holding back his frustration, approached the microphone set up at the counter. His voice trembled, but he managed to say, "Yesterday I made a mistake. My behavior was unprofessional and unacceptable. I apologize to all customers, especially those who may have been offended." Some patrons applauded, though others in the crowd watched the scene with skepticism. As Harry observed the reactions, he knew the changes would take time, but the first step had been made. In the weeks that followed, the bar became known as a place where everyone was welcome. Harry's story spread across social media, attracting new customers who appreciated the principles of freedom and equality. As for Eric, he managed to keep his job, but changed his attitude. He became more reserved and professional, understanding that his future depended on showing respect to others. Late one evening, Harry left the bar, looking at the glowing windows. He knew he had made the right decision, and felt satisfied that he had not only restored justice, but also transformed the place that was now a source of pride.